Hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa Perdomo with Bloomberg Quick Take. The Big Ten is back. They announced today that college football will be played this year. To break down the news, I'm joined by college football expert Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic. Nicole, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
So break down the news for me today. It was a busy day for you, I'm sure. They announced 1 month ago they postponed the season, and now here we are. How did we get here?
Yeah, it's been a crazy 40-day period of time here. That's going back to when they announced their revised fall schedule. Then 6 days later, postponed the season indefinitely. And then now we're here 36 days later saying that they are going to play in the fall after all with an October 23rd, 24th start date. It's kind of crazy because as everyone who's kind of loosely followed sports understands, there has been a lot of anger about the Big Ten's decision to postpone. So you had parents organizing protests. Justin Fields, the quarterback at Ohio State, he had started a petition to get the Big Ten to reverse this decision. There was a lawsuit from Nebraska players, coaches like Ryan Day at Ohio State, James Franklin at Penn State, Scott Frost at Nebraska, really banging the drum saying, we can play, let us play, other people are playing. So that was the backdrop you had here. And then the league found out that they could have rapid daily antigen testing. So that changes the equation from a medical standpoint and gets to the point where university presidents were coming to a unanimous decision to restart the season in October.
So we have the daily testing that really made them feel comfortable. What are the other protocols they have going on that is going to make this as safe as possible for the students?
Yeah. Now, just to harp on that daily testing element for a second, what it does is it ensures that every athlete that steps on that field for practice or a competition has tested negative for COVID right then. So what that means is you're not going to be having someone do a PCR test, wait a few days to get the result, and perhaps unknowingly spread the virus within their own team or to an opponent who may be living somewhere else in the country. So cutting down on that and the contact tracing required is a huge deal. And that's why people refer to these daily tests as game changers. So you have that part of the puzzle as well. And then there's also very specific detailed protocols. A player that tests positive is not available to return competition for 21 days, which is longer than the other leagues that are playing right now, because they're going to go through a series of cardiac screening to address concerns related to myocarditis and other heart inflammations. So you have a couple of different things happening here, as well as restrictions about, okay, if you're at a certain positivity rate on your roster or in your community, you're not able to play and it would trigger a shutdown. So there's very specific thresholds from a health and safety standpoint that these teams are going to have to meet on a weekly basis in order to play games. So it's very, very detailed, and it answers a lot of those questions that the presidents had 4 weeks ago.
And like you said, some people were very angry with the Big Ten's decision to not play. Do you think they should have waited it out like the other conferences? Do you think now that we have these new things in place that it was kind of a bad call on their part? Or do you think they were really just trying to do what they thought was best for their athletes?
I mean, I think they thought that they were doing what's best for their athletes. And these are university presidents who have to make decisions about the entire campus, right? Like they're dealing with stuff beyond just sports, and they don't want to have something that's going to put the entire community, the state, the city, everyone at risk just to play football games, right? So you had 11 presidents that 5 weeks ago decided to postpone the season indefinitely and then received new medical information and again, cardiac screening and ways to address the heart inflammation problem, and some of those long-term potential health risks as well. So all of that changes the equation. That's kind of how I've been phrasing it. It changes the equation of how you feel comfortable allowing something to move forward or not. And I think that what you could have done absolutely 5 weeks ago is delay the start of the season, buy time, see if there are advances in daily rapid testing, which is what some of these other leagues did do. The SEC hasn't started yet, and their decision to postpone to September 26th looks smarter and smarter in retrospect because it buys you time for medical advancements and to see how other people are doing this on other campuses.
Right. And just like that, you said to see how other people are doing it. Do you think the pressure from other people playing or at least having plans to play also push them forward to this decision?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think, obviously this doesn't happen without the medical advances and the procurement of the daily rapid testing. But I think you could absolutely, I don't think we get to this point where it's such a hot topic if you don't have that public pressure and your own coaches applying that pressure constantly. And part of their refrain, including Ryan Day at Ohio State earlier last week, was, hey, other people are playing. Notre Dame is playing. So why is it safe enough for them, but it's not safe enough for us? And so I think, you also have high school sports taking place in a lot of these states as well. So it absolutely is an important backdrop and a factor. But, Northwestern's president, Morton Shapiro, he was on a Zoom call with us earlier in the day. And, he was asked basically that exact question. And he said that for him was not the decision. He is someone who voted to postpone 5 weeks ago. He said the medical advice for the advisors for the conference were split 5 weeks ago, and they were unanimous and comfortable now. And that's what changed his decision. But it'd be foolish to pretend that backdrop, didn't come into play here.
Right, for sure. And talking about the competition aspect of it, now the Big Ten is back. What does it look like for the college football playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have a chance. The Big Ten champion is going to have a chance to make the college football playoff, because all you really need in a weird year like this, where we don't know how many games, Alabama's going to play or Oklahoma's going to play because of, contact tracing and these postponements that have already happened. We've already had over a dozen in college football so far. You just need to get in the ballpark, and this will allow the Big Ten champion. There's no built-in idle weeks because of the time crunch here, but it's an 8+1. So you'll have 8 regular season games and then a conference championship, and that will put them in the ballpark as teams that are playing 10 games in a conference championship will have. So this is going to be a huge challenge for the college football playoff selection committee, because it's already a tough job, but it's going to be more subjective and challenging than ever before, when you're going to have teams that are likely not going to be playing the same amount of games. They're also going to be playing different types of schedules, but they're also probably not playing just fundamentally the same amount of games.
And also, since they're starting so much later than everybody knows, game time is so important and getting into the rhythm of that. So do you think that having this start so later in the season is also going to help hurt them in the way that maybe their play won't be as strong?
I actually think it might be the opposite, because we've seen a lot of sloppy play come out in the first couple of weeks of the season. And it makes total sense, because if you think about it, these athletes didn't have spring football. They all went home for 3 months, tried to stay in shape, but weren't, using their state-of-the-art strength and conditioning programs that they're used to. And then they came back, and even their fall preseason camp was truncated. So we've seen, especially special teams has been a mess. People, haven't implemented different types of defenses, or more of the playbook offensively. So this will give them more time to ramp up. It's also a league that didn't actually get to the point of having full contact practices. They actually shut down prior to preseason camp. So they do need this month plus to ramp up from just a physical safety standpoint, so that they are ready for full contact, full speed when games start. But also they will have some more time to have more of a traditional training camp, which could end up helping them, because as we've seen, some of these other programs are a little bit rusty.
For sure. And now, Nicole, can you tell me what's going on with the Pac-12? They're expected to, maybe make an announcement, but they do have some complications. Can you describe to us what's going on with that?
Yeah, I think all eyes now go to the Pac-12, because now we're back up to 4 of the 5 Power 5 leagues playing in the fall, in the traditional time period. And I think that, the Pac-12 is not expected to immediately follow the Big Ten's decision, although the Pac-12 did procure daily rapid antigen testing as well. It will be on their campuses by the end of September, but the circumstances are totally different. All of the schools in California and Oregon face severe restrictions from their states, so they can't practice. They couldn't have a contact practice right now, and that's 6 members of your conference. So you actually had USC players write a letter to Governor Gavin Newsom last night, Tuesday night, asking basically to roll back some of those restrictions so they can practice. Obviously, there's pro sports happening in California, but they're granted certain exemptions. Right now, these college programs can't practice, can't get in the weight room. So that is a huge limiting factor, understandably. So even with the testing, even with momentum, people feeling like with cardiac screening, they feel more comfortable with the heart inflammation and some of those other long-term risks. They just physically can't practice. And that's when we talk about how this is the virus is different in different parts of the country. It's because different states have different restrictions in place based on those local outbreaks. So that's absolutely a factor when you think about the Pac-12 and whether or not this adjusts their timeline at all.
And what kind of pressure do you think the USC players were putting on the governor there? Do you think that will really change anything, or do you think there's bigger things that they really have to focus on?
Well, I would have said that there's bigger things for politicians to focus on about the Big Ten too, and the president has been tweeting about it, right? So I do think that it's certainly an interesting it's an interesting development. And again, they're not even asking to necessarily be able to play games; they're just asking to reduce some of the restrictions so they can practice, they can work out, they can ramp up for whenever they are able to play. And it's particularly interesting because this is a governor who has been, at the forefront of athlete rights when it comes to name, image, and likeness. This is also a conference that had, the We Are United players movement about health and safety and about economic rights for these athletes. So I kind of wonder, all of that coming together, I am very curious to see how Gavin Newsom responds, if it's pro-athletes and this is what they want to do, or if it's pro-safety, because again, he's been very restrictive, from a state standpoint about what regular people can do to try to get control of this pandemic.
I would love to touch on that campaign that they did put out. Do you think that in any way stops them from trying to play this season, or do you think that's something that's in the back of the president's minds before they really go ahead with the plan?
It's an interesting question because it was so late. It was like almost an 11th hour effort because it happened basically right as the league was shutting down and making those decisions for the health and safety reasons. And a lot of those reasons and the demands from those Pac-12 players were about health and safety concerns. So to me, I think if you address those, you don't have that issue as much. You also, in between now and then, you've had the NCAA said any player can opt out for health reasons this year and have their scholarship next year. You've had the NCAA rule that no matter how many games are played, everyone's getting a free year of eligibility. You're not harming anything. So to me, some of those major concerns were addressed, and I think also you had these athletes who were even part of the movement, when they would get asked, are you willing to opt out? Are you willing to not play and strike? And they weren't necessarily sure. I think, if you talk to some of the organizers, some of them were absolutely willing not to play, and the other ones were waiting to see if some of those conditions improved. So, it was an interesting, again, threat of a boycott, but it was also, again, we never got to the point where it's fully formed and we got to see just how many players would have been involved. So I do think with some health and safety concerns addressed, it's a different animal.
Absolutely. Nicole, thanks so much for joining me and shedding some light on these really busy days that we've been having in college football. We'll keep an eye on the Pac-12, and I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to seeing the Big Ten this year.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thanks for joining us, guys.